You're listening to Inside Lebo, a podcast giving you an inside look at Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, produced by Mount Lebanon's Public Information Office.
Hello and welcome to Inside Lebo. I'm your host, Assistant Municipal Manager and Municipal Planner, Ian McMeans.
And I'm Mount Lebanon's Assistant Public Information Officer and Senior Editor of Mount Lebanon Magazine, Rachel Windsor.
So for today's episode, Rachel is actually going to interview me, so I'm going to hand over the hosting hat to Rachel so that she can ask me some questions about a very exciting plan that's happening this summer in Mount Lebanon.
Yeah, so some of you may have heard a little bit in the past about the active transportation plan that Mount Lebanon had down the line with Dormont. So there's been a little bit of movement on that, no pun intended. And we recently received the Active Allegheny grant for $50,000 to put that towards part of the active transportation plan. So Ian, why don't you start by just giving us a little bit of background about what an active transportation plan is and what has led up to this point so far?
Sure. So this idea really built out of a lot of neighborhood recommendations and suggestions for ways to improve mobility throughout the community. We had a lot of people coming to the municipality asking us to look at street designs and improve sidewalks and things like that to improve the overall mobility of the community. Now, an active transportation plan kind of specifically looks at active ways of moving around the community, whether that be walking, running, jogging, biking, scooters, some kind of human-powered mobility. That said, we are not zoning out cars or anything like that, right? The plan obviously considers for all types of movement around the community. And a few years ago when we were going through the Ascend Lebo comprehensive plan process, we had an entire section of the plan dedicated to mobility, and the comp plan really focused on origins and destinations. So where are people starting from and where are they trying to get to in the community, and what ways do they get there, and how does that interact, right? When you come to Uptown, are you driving? Are you parking in a garage? Are you parking on the street? Are you walking? Are you biking? Are you taking the T? So we tried to figure out, ways that people get around the community, and one of the recommendations was to conduct an active transportation plan to dig more into how people move through the community and building up those the infrastructure to allow people to have whatever means they want to. If you want to take a car, fine, great, take a car. If you want to bike, is there the infrastructure available? And infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be bike lanes on every street. Infrastructure could mean are there bike racks at the parks? Are there bike racks in our business district that can accommodate those things? So it's really finding ways to accommodate how people want to get about the community and making that possible and accessible for everybody. So building on that, last year, the commission budgeted some money to conduct an active transportation plan, and at the same time, our neighbors to the north, Dormont, were also considering an active transportation plan. So we started talking together and decided to do a multi-municipal active transportation plan, because between Mount Lebanon and Dormont, we have not only a very connected street grid network, in the areas where our communities border each other, but also have a lot of similar type streets. Both communities have streets that have straight curbs. Both of us have communities that have rolled curbs. We're both largely residential communities with a lot of driveways accessing our residential streets. We both have some brick streets, we have some concrete streets, we have some asphalt streets, and we both have topographical challenges that can make it hard to get around. We both have a shared corridor of Washington Road and West Liberty Avenue that runs through the center of our towns that brings a lot of cars every day through the community, but also thinking about, a lot of people walk through the business districts and supplemental business districts with Potomac and Dormont, Beverly and Castle Shannon and Mount Lebanon. So just thinking about all the similarities between our communities, it made a lot of sense to partner together, and we have a lot of shared goals as far as mobility goes. Building on that, after we adopted our comprehensive plan, Dormont had recently instituted a advisory board that they call their Safe Mobility Commission to start to tackle some of these things in Dormont. After our comp plan was implemented, we did our advisory board realignment, and now we have a mobility and transportation board. So now both communities have advisory boards that are focused on transportation and mobility throughout the communities. So it made a whole lot of sense to have those groups both help us out with putting together the RFP for the plan, and we selected Tool Design Inc., who's a nationally renowned firm, to conduct this plan. They were selected late last year. Both Dormont's council and our commission have approved the contract, so we'll be kicking off the plan very soon here.
Very cool. Do you know of any other municipalities that have sort of had this like joint venture? Because it's not something that I'm super aware of other places in the region doing this sort of work together.
A couple other communities in the region have done them. So Edgewood out in the East End has done one. Forest Hills has done one as well. So some of the other communities in our region have done active transportation plans, but not on a multi-municipal effort like what we're doing with Dormont here, which is very exciting.
Yeah, it is. Great. So tell us a little bit more specifically about the grant that the municipality just got for doing this sort of work.
Sure. So the grant we got is $50,000 from Allegheny County. It's their Active Allegheny grant program. And one of the things that they are willing to fund is transportation plans and things like that.
Okay, great. So we will take a quick break, and then when we come back, Ian's going to tell us a little bit more what this actually means for residents, what changes you might be seeing to the roads, or, possible ways that there might be room for community involvement going forward. So we'll be right back with more Inside Lebo. All right, and welcome back to Inside Lebo, and today Ian McMeans is our guest instead of our host. So we are talking about the active transportation plan between Mount Lebanon and Dormont. So Ian, tell us a little bit about how potentially residents might be able to get involved through community engagement efforts with the transportation plan as it develops.
Yes, there's definitely going to be a lot of opportunities for community involvement with the formulation of the plan. So we haven't formally kicked off the plan just yet. Mount Lebanon, as many people know, recently completed our comprehensive plan. Dormont's comprehensive plan is in its final review phase right now, so they're wrapping up that project. So both communities already do have a good amount of data that we've gathered from our residents, but we always like hearing more from our residents about what they want out of their community. So there will be a lot of public engagement efforts throughout the summertime and probably into the fall with the active transportation plan. And the idea of doing it that way is because the plan is focused on human-powered mobility and how people get around. Doing community engagement in the wintertime when people tend to not walk or bike or use their own mobility as much as they do in the summertime when it's very nice outside and the weather's more conducive to walking and biking and things like that. It really makes a lot more sense to just kind of do the engagement in the summer and then into the fall. Also because the fall is when school starts again and kids will be walking to school. So being able to capture, some feedback on how students get about the community and how they get to school and what, barriers to getting to school there might be, whether it's, community connectivity between different neighborhoods and lacking connections. One of the recommendations in our comprehensive plan, and actually the Parks Master Plan before that, was to look at our parks and wooded areas as potential connectors or thoroughfares to maybe build trails through to connect different neighborhoods together, or even to make walking to school easier in certain areas. So, the active transportation plan isn't just focused on the cartway or what's happening in the streets. It really does look at mobility from a holistic community-wide perspective.
Cool. And so that might be, showing up to mobility board hearings, right? And really getting involved, whether it's your street that you live on or, just if you have thoughts about how the community should be designed or structured. And so thinking a little bit about what this actually means for residents, planning is awesome, but I know a lot of people want to think about what that means either in the immediate term for them or a little bit down the road. So what sorts of implementable things are you going to be getting from the active transportation plan that residents can look forward to or might know is happening?
Yes. So I think on the whole, there are two very broad goals that we'd like to achieve through this active transportation plan. So the first is, since it's a coordinated plan with Dormont, having a shared vision for the major corridor of both of our communities, which is the Washington Road, West Liberty Avenue corridor. And we've had some initial conversations, including with PennDOT, because PennDOT has a resurfacing project that's coming soon. I'm not sure exactly when it's on the budget for them, but I know phase 1 was going from the Liberty tunnels up through Potomac Avenue and Dormont, and then phase 2 would be Potomac Avenue and Dormont through Cochrane Road and Mount Lebanon. So if there's any consideration for any changes to the roadway when PennDOT comes through and repaves the road, then having that shared vision between the communities to be able to advocate for that. Both communities have complete streets policies. Both communities by that time will have newly adopted comprehensive plans, and having a shared active transportation plan hopefully can give that corridor more of a consistent look and feel and shared vision for the major thoroughfare through our community. Obviously, it's a PennDOT road, so PennDOT has the ultimate say on what happens with that stretch of road, but having a shared vision for the two communities was very important to both of us. The second thing that Mount Lebanon specifically would like to get out of the plan, and Dormont may kind of use this piece as well, but I'm not as deeply involved in the Dormont, behind the scenes political structures I am here in Mount Lebanon, but the goal of, I think the second major goal of the plan is to not prescribe certain things for certain streets. So the plan's not going to necessarily say Sleepy Hollow Road has to look like this, or Woodland Drive has to look like this, or Larchmont Drive has to look like this, or Osage Road's going to look like this. It's not going to say that. I think what we would like to see out of the plan is kind of a buffet of options for different types of streets. So between a local residential street and a collector street and an arterial street and a major highway kind of street, which we have not only Washington Road, but Connor Road, Gilkison Road, along with Bower Hill Road. We have some major 4-lane roads that come through the community. I think having options for those streets that have been vetted through nationally recognized consultants that do this work on a professional basis, that say, okay, if a resident comes to us and they live on a street and they say, I would like some kind of traffic calming with my street, we can say, okay, the active transportation plan has these 7 or 8 different options to consider. It's not necessarily just speed bumps or just curb bulb outs or just changing the chicane pattern of the cartway or something like that. There's a number of different options that could be considered, but those options may differ from street type to street type. So I think having those options to have a resident come to the mobility board is the first place to start, to come to the mobility board and say, I would like traffic calming on my street, and the mobility board can say, great, here's some options to consider. We'll have public meetings with people on your street. We'll see which kind of options people like, and it may be that people just want to keep the street as is and don't want to do anything, and that's fine, but at least we'll have some options to consider that have been vetted for the types of streets where they are, because certain things like, say, bike lanes or VUNERFs or something like that may work on local streets, or they may work on arterial streets, but they might not work on both. Or a protected bike lane that has a concrete curb alongside of it probably doesn't work on a residential street where you have driveway cutouts coming in every 20 to 40 feet. So just considering what works and what doesn't work on different types of streets I think is really important for us. And the other piece is that one of our visions for the mobility board was to be able to have the board start to look at streets that may be up for reconstruction, not in the immediate future, but kind of in the medium-term future, in that kind of 3 to 5 year out window, and say, okay, your street is on the list to be considered for reconstruction, within 3 to 5 years, but not necessarily immediately. Maybe we'll invite all the residents from those streets to come in to public meetings of the mobility board and show them the options and say, hey, we're going to be tearing up your street and rebuilding it from the base up already. what would you like it to be put back in as? Do you want it to just stay what it is? And if you do, fine, but at least we had a conversation with our residents, and at least we presented some options for them to consider. And or people may say they want a completely different look and feel for the street, but then when our engineers start to develop the reconstruction documents and drawings, they already have kind of the vision in mind that the residents want. The mobility board can review it and approve it. They can go to the commission for review and approval. So it can already have some vetting before it gets to the point where we're actually putting it out to bid to install something new, and it gives us an opportunity for more engagement with our residents. So it is a implementable plan, but it is not necessarily a prescriptive plan that's going to say this is what you have to do on this specific street. I think it's more of a plan that's going to give us options for consideration so that we can overall achieve the goal of improved mobility throughout the community. And I think the one thing I always go back to with this is when we started the comprehensive plan process, the very first thing we did with the comp plan was we asked a short survey. We had, I think, over 1,000 responses, and had 2 questions. It had, what do you like most about Mount Lebanon, and what would you like to see change over the next 10 years? And the number one response for both was walkability. The people like the walkability of the community, but they would also like to see the walkability of the community improve, because there are certain areas where there might not be sidewalks, or there might be a sidewalk but there's a gap for 2 houses, and if you're in a wheelchair or taking a stroller or whatever, it can be difficult to have to walk through someone's grass and then get back on the sidewalk. So I think that is the one data point that I always keep coming back to with this active transportation plan, is that people love the mobility options that are available in Mount Lebanon, and they want more of them. So we kind of feel like it's incumbent on us to respond to what our residents are telling us that they want, which is improved mobility throughout the community, and we're very hopeful that the active transportation plan can help us get there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a really salient point. Thank you for sharing that. And I know residents will be looking for more information on it in the future. Mount Lebanon Magazine will have some, and you can always find up-to-date information on mountlebanon.org about any sort of transportation plans that we are engaged in. So thank you so much, Ian, for talking to us today about all things transportation. And that's going to be it for this edition of Inside Lebo, produced by Marsha Morgenstern, with music by Drew Mignot and graphics by Chris Leeper. So thank you for listening to Inside Lebo, and be sure to subscribe for future episodes.
Thanks for listening to Inside Lebo, produced by Mount Lebanon's Public Information Office. Learn more about all things Lebo at mountlebanon.org, or by following our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages.